Hi everyone, Rob here from Mountain Journeys. Today I'm going to be talking about various types of footwear that you can use on Transalpine trips. So Transalpine trips are pretty much any kind of off-track tramping trip that's likely to involve a little bit of mountaineering terrain as well. So likely to have some snow travel, maybe some glacier travel, a lot of untracked terrain, steep loose rock, scree, tussock slopes, snowgrass, riverbeds, that sort of thing. So I'm not in the mountains. I couldn't take 7 pairs of boots with me that easily into the hills. So I'm just at my local neighborhood of Littleton, but it's got enough terrain here to show you what I'm talking about. So this is not a video to tell you what specific type of boot to get. There are many pros and cons for every different type of footwear depending on what type of trip you're doing, what season you're doing it in, how lightweight you're traveling, what your experience level is, lots of different factors. But this should provide some guidance that's useful if you're going to be purchasing a pair of boots, or to help you realize what some pros and cons might be of the footwear you've already got. Okay, so let me just outline which footwear we're going to go through today. Okay, so I'm not going to be talking about specific brands. This video is going to more concentrate on just different styles of shoe that are out there. So I've ordered these from lightest to heaviest. This is a pair of running shoes essentially. They're pretty lightweight, just with a high ankle. These are about 700 grams. We've got a burly pair of low ankle approach shoes, also about 700 grams. We've got a fairly lightweight pair of synthetic tramping boots. These are 1.2 kilos for the pair. A reasonably light pair of mountaineering boots. These are 1.3 kilograms for the pair. Your good old school style full leather tramping boots. These are 1.8 kgs for the pair. A type of boot that's often regarded just as a good all-round Transalpine boot. It's essentially a mountaineering boot. That's 2 kilos for the pair. And a high ankle alpine boot intended for long routes, long days in the mountains. This is 2.1 kgs for the pair. Okay, so before we start talking about specific types of shoes, I just want to talk about a couple of other aspects that we need to, that are often talked about in a confusing way. So one of those is crampon compatibility. I will do another video on different types of crampons and how they can fit onto different types of footwear. I just want to say though that you can effectively find some type of crampon that will work on almost any type of footwear. Okay, so just because you've got a type of shoe or boot that isn't technically crampon compatible doesn't necessarily stop you from using crampons on it. You just have to be very aware of its limitations. Okay, so I'll talk about that when I talk about specific types of boot. But I just wanted to say that all of these types of footwear can deal with crampons, but the more flexible ones are not so good for sustained periods of snow, and not at all good if that snow starts to get moderately steep. The other thing I want to talk about is ankle support. Alright, so if you have an uneven section of trail that you're not expecting and you accidentally twist your ankle, and especially if you've got a heavy pack on, you essentially need to be in a ski boot for that boot to stop your ankle rolling, right? A boot just having a little bit of height on the ankle here is not going to stop you twisting your ankle or spraining your ankle if it's on the way anyway, okay? So in that case, why do we even have high ankle boots if they don't really provide much extra ankle support compared to a low ankle shoe like this? It's two main things: ankle protection, both in terms of blows from the side as well as crampon straps. Also the amount of cold that you might have to deal with. But the key one, which I want to get onto, is how easy it is to use the edge of your boot. In other words, how much can you get into the slope like this and stay on that edge, on that rail, when you're on steep terrain? And that's what I'll get onto again when we talk about different models. Okay, so starting with the lightweight running shoes. These are pretty much just a running shoe with a high ankle. I really love these for fast packing trips. Any kind of tramping trips where I'm going to be wanting to move quickly and it's mostly on trails, these are really good for. They protect your ankle bones from knocks from logs and the occasional rock, and they're so light on your feet, they're an absolute joy to move in. However, They would not protect your feet very well from scree, and they would also get pulverized pretty quickly and kind of torn to shreds on the sides, especially on the wide part of your foot here. As soon as you get onto a slope, they're not quite so good. You know, slopes like this, where you can't really just rely on the grippiness of the bottom of your sole, you've really got to get your edge in. These are using a lot of muscle power to keep that edge in, because the boots themselves have so much flex in them. That same flex makes them pretty insecure for using crampons as well. So you could chuck some crampons on these if you had a very short section of flat frozen snow to get across, but you'd want to move up the range a little bit if you had some proper snow. Alright, now we'll move on to the approach shoe. This is a fairly burly pair of approach shoes. They've got a slightly thicker fabric to them and quite a lot of rubber around the toe to protect your foot. These are really good for trips involving a lot of scrambling around on bedrock, like actual rock slabs rather than loose boulders and scree. A Central Darren's Traverse, for example, these would be great. You could still put crampons on them for easy sections of snow, but if you had any kind of sustained snow, they'd have the same limitations really as the previous pair of running shoes. They're just a little bit too flexible to be secure on sustained snow slopes. Any proper off-track Transalpine trips as well that are going to involve steep tussock and snowgrass, steep gravel, that sort of thing, they're just not going to give you the same security as a proper pair of boots. Again, I'm using a lot of energy to try and keep my my edges in there, and my ankles are pretty exposed as well from knocks from rocks and logs and that sort of thing. Okay, so now for the lightweight synthetic hiking boots. So these are about 1.2 kgs for the pair, which is fairly lightweight, which makes them really energy efficient to use. These are the ones I've actually been using for the majority of my trips over the last little while. The main thing I like about them is they've got a good edge on the sides of the sole. So on steep tussock slopes and snowgrass and steep gravel, these give me a really secure grip without needing too much muscle power. Their main limitation is that they're still quite flexible in this orientation. So if you're using crampons with them, you do get really tired calves in a very short space of time. So any sustained moderate snow, you'd again want to step up to a stiffer boot. But in mid to late summer, early autumn, when there's not a huge amount of snow around, these boots can get you through almost anything in the Southern Alps. So yeah, I've been loving them. Okay, now for the lightweight mountaineering boots. So these are only about 100 grams heavier for the pair than the last pair that we looked at. These are about 1.3 kgs for both of them. The main difference being they've got a little bit more stiffness in the toe. So if you've got a lot of sustained front pointing, these shouldn't use that much energy. They're still not what you'd want to use for ice climbing, but for moderate snow, they would actually be excellent. They've also got a very good edge on their side. So what's not to like about them? They're lightweight and they can deal with most types of terrain. Well, the first thing is shared with the last pair of boots, in that because they're lightweight, they're probably not going to last as long as a heavier boot. So it depends on your priorities about how long you want your boot to last versus how much energy you use while using them. The other thing is that because of that extra stiffness, if you've got a lot of flat walking, it could end up rubbing quite a lot on your heel. So if they're not a perfect fit, then you could end up getting blister problems. So you might want to consider possibly the more flexible boot if you've got a higher proportion of mild terrain walking and not much steeper snow. But if you've got a lot of steep terrain and you don't want a heavy boot, these are a really good choice. Okay, the Old Faithfuls, the full leather tramping boot. So there are a variety of stiffnesses out there depending on how much crampon use you're going to be doing, how much snow travel you need to do. These ones have a reasonable amount of flex to them, probably a similar amount to those lightweight synthetic tramping boots that we had a couple of pairs ago. So they can deal with some cramponing here and there, but if you've got some sustained front pointing, you'd want a stiffer model than these ones. Their edge is almost as good as the previous two pairs, definitely better than the approach shoes and the running shoes, and good enough for most kind of off-track terrain. But as soon as it starts getting sustained, like with some long snowgrass and gravel sections, you will get a little bit tired because of the muscle power it needs to stay secure on those slopes. So what's to love about these then? If they're 1.8 kgs for the pair, their edge isn't quite as good and they're not quite as stiff, then you know, why do we still want them? The main thing is they're a little bit more durable, and well, the main thing is they're leather, which gives you two things. They're a little bit more durable and they're ultra comfortable. They just mold exactly to the shape of your foot. So if durability and comfort are really important to you, and you don't need a really lightweight pair of boots, and you don't need top performance in terms of ability on steep terrain, these are a really great all-rounder. Now, at long last, we're at the pair where, if you just want to be secure no matter where you go, take yourself a pair of these, some actual mountaineering boots. These have a super solid edge. They're pretty stiff in the toes, so you can do cramponing all day in them. You could climb Mount Cook in these, you'd be okay. Steep snowgrass, scree, no problem. For several years of use, I would say. Their main downside is they're 2 kgs, and walking up a flat valley with that kind of stiffness could do some damage to your heels, again, if they're not a perfect fit. But if you just want a good, reliable Transalpine boot that will keep you secure no matter what terrain you're on, these are fantastic. So finally we come to the high-end mountaineering boots, the last pair we're going to review in this video. So if the last pair of mountaineering boots that we looked at were so good, then why do we need to spend $200 more on these, especially when they're 100 grams heavier? The two main differences are design and materials. So the result of that is that these keep you slightly warmer, and they're ridiculously comfortable for how stiff they are. So again, really great edge. You can just walk around anywhere in the mountains in these and you're going to feel secure. Long days on steep snow or ice, no problem. You don't need to use too much energy to stand on your toes. And their design does make them pretty comfortable, for me at least, walking up a valley. The only downside to them is their weight. They're going to use a little bit of energy to move around in the hills. These are 3 times the weight of the very first pair we reviewed in this video. So walking up or down a valley, they are going to use a lot more energy. And yes, they are more than $1,000. So that's certainly a consideration for a lot of people. But if you can afford it, and you think you're going to spend a lot of time on steep off-track terrain, and a lot of time doing kind of moderate grade mountaineering routes, these are terrific. Alright, so there was one thing I forgot to talk about when I was showing you those different models of boots, and that was the heel step. So this little vertical piece that a lot of models of boot have at the front of the heel is called the step, and that's what's going to grip the ground when you're going directly downhill. So if you're on soft ground especially, that's what's going to stop you from just slipping over. So that can be an issue with boots like this that don't have any kind of step like that. So I've had lightweight mountaineering boots in the past that have quite a smooth sole, and when I've taken them in the bush, on downhills, even on trails, I found myself slipping all over the place. It's not an issue on snow and rock, but if you're going to be going through the bush and tussock and stuff on soft ground, it's something to consider. So I hope this video was useful for you. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you're still wondering that you'd like some answers on. And please feel free to suggest any other videos that you'd like me to do in the future on other topics. Thanks very much.